Oh yeah. Yes. Bit of health and safety. Do avoid all the technology down here. There's quite a lot of it. But we have for you this time we've got Mr. Peter Davison. Needs very little introduction. Terry Molloy and Dominic Glynn. So would you like to give them a round of applause, please?
Hello. Yes, so for those of you that don't know me, I am Luke. I run the My New Doctor Who podcast, and this is Tim.
I'm Tim. I do a podcast called Tim's Take On. Yep, I know it's a terrible name.
But because it's a video podcast, I'm usually on the camera as well, but I can't because I'm down here. So Dr. Sinister is up there filming. If I could just ask Dr. Sinister to frame our three guests for me, are we good? And if you could just say to camera, hello and welcome to the Minute Doctor Who podcast, that would be fantastic.
Hello and welcome to the Minute Doctor Who podcast.
Hello and welcome to the... what is that?
Minute
Let's try that again. Let's try again with Peter.
What is it, Minute Doctor?
Minute Doctor Who podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to the Minute Doctor Who podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Minute Doctor Who podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Minute Doctor Who podcast.
There's the professional.
So, let's start with you, Peter. I am a child of the wilderness years. I was born shortly after you regenerated into Colin Baker, and so I discovered Doctor Who on VHS, and the first story I saw was The Five Doctors. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Well, yes, it was a great thrill to be involved in that. As the incumbent. And we were very lucky to get everyone on board. Obviously, we couldn't get William Hartnell, and Tom chose to not be with us. But unfortunately for Tom, he had done an episode called Sharda, which had been hit by the BBC strike, and so it still existed, and the BBC had the rights to it. So he couldn't avoid being in it in the end. And in a photo call, well, I signed actually a picture this morning. We did one shot, a proper photo call with him as a waxwork. Surprisingly unlifelike, actually. Anyway, yeah, and so we had great fun. I think that my only regret about the Five Doctors was that I think John Nathan Turner was a bit afraid to put us all together. He felt that there would be too many egos and flying around, and so we were kept in separate storylines until we got together later on. Which I thought was a shame, because actually we'd gotten really well and it was fine, and I was in awe of Patrick Troughton because he was my doctor. John was nice, we just defer to John because he was Mr. Showbiz. So I just enjoyed it. So I would have loved to have done more with them.
Great. Fantastic. Tim, I believe you have some questions for Peter.
Yes. You were just 29 years old when cast as the Doctor. Did you have any idea what you were letting yourself in for with Doctor Who conventions and meeting fans?
No, not really, because the convention thing, really, I wasn't aware of it, and I think it was only just getting going. I was aware that the programme was very popular, and that, so that I would be sort of a household face, if you like. So I was aware of that side of it, but just simply in terms of, and if you'd asked me, do you think that in 2014 you'll still be sitting, at a convention, I would never have dreamed that was possible. It is the longest lasting job in show business, and it's a job that you just never leave, really. Even though you leave, you're always whatever doctor number you were. So no, I had no idea. In fact, when I just got cast, I think before we'd even started working on it, I did my first convention in Tulsa, Oklahoma. At the Hotel Camelot, I remember it vividly. And I remember being asked a question as if I was Patrick Troughton. And that was very unnerving. They actually said, in such and such an episode, you did this. I thought, what? And they were actually asking me because I was the Doctor, so they bought into it. It was a great thrill. I was the first actor to play the part who'd grown up watching the series. So it was a great thrill to be the Doctor, and indeed, also very intimidating. I had to think quite long and hard before I said yes to it. But no, I had no idea, in short, what I was letting myself into. But it was all very pleasant.
Great. Let's just move on to Dominic for a minute. You were a composer for Doctor Who during the last days of the show, and you were able to do the theme, and you've just, I believe, remixed them for another convention. Can you tell us a bit about that process of revisiting that work?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was asked to do the convention in Los Angeles, and I felt that I wanted to go and do something different, not just go and talk about the things that I did. I thought, well, I am a musician, I want to go and play some bloody music. So I took my laptop along and worked on a remix, basically, in my arrangement of the theme, performed it live at Gallifrey, and it went down a storm, actually, and people kept saying, well, when can we buy it? And I said, well, you can't buy it, I've just done it, you know. But so many people asked me, and I thought, hang on, I hatch a plan, and you know, after a couple of months, I put together 3 other mixes and put 4 mixes together and released them on iTunes. And so it was as simple as that, really. 4 different versions based on my original arrangement, and so far they've gone down really well. So you know, happy with the way it worked out, really. Anyone who hasn't heard them, go on iTunes. Gallifrey remixes. Only £3.90.
Yeah, they are very good. I downloaded them and have been listening to them quite regularly since then. So, Tim, over to you.
Yes, Peter, you've done a lot of work for Big Finish over the years, but only recently had the full complement of your TARDIS crew reunited. What was it like being reunited with Matthew Waterhouse playing Adric once more?
We all really enjoyed giving him a hard time, just like we used to. No, it was fun. It was good. I mean, I think that I started off, as I mentioned, go on. So I gave Matthew a few notes. No, he was very nice, and he takes being sent up quite well, Matthew. But it was hard holding him back, hard holding Janet Fielding back, actually. She was the one who wouldn't let him off the hook. Where have you bloody been the last few years? No, it was very pleasant, very nice. But I like doing, it's sort of, it's just like a trip down memory lane, really, and it's just very nice to still, Big Finish is responsible for keeping us together socially, it really is, so it's been great from that point of view.
Fantastic. Terry, let me bring you in at this point. I first came across you not as Davros, for whom you're famous here, but as Mike Tucker in the Archers. And we understand we've lost David Troughton today because he's off recording. Just tell me a bit about your recent storylines in the Archers, which have been with your Down syndrome baby. Can you tell us something about acting in that?
Yeah, in fact, this last year, it was 30 years of Doctor. I don't know, 30 years since I started in Doctor Who, and 40 years since I started in the Archers. It's a job that I did for 5 weeks and just never stopped really. I don't know how David's not here, because I was booked for today at the Archers and I told them no. And I got them to shift the scenes from my episode to Thursday when I was in there recording on Thursday, which they did. So he could have done it, you know. I mean, I'm sorry about this, you know. These Troughtons, you know. Unreliable. You wait for hours and then 3 of them come along at once. The Archers, yes, it's my character's gone through kind of lots of. I mean, he started off as a rabid union man, you know, red in the bed. And I mean, he's always been a moaning Minnie. He only opens his mouth to change feet, and he suffers fools with no gladness whatsoever. But he's mellowed a bit since he got remarried, and Vicky and he had a Down syndrome child last year.
Tim, another question from you, I think.
I'm going to dominate Peter a little. The questions are going to dominate Peter then. Well, for a start, I very much, and everyone I know very much enjoyed the Five-ish Doctors. How did you get into filmmaking as a profession? Interesting reaction.
Yeah.
And were you really under the sheets in the Doctor Who story?
Okay. Right. How did I get into filmmaking? Well, I suppose, you know, obviously I've done a lot of filming as an actor, and I think probably you pick up a lot more than you realise as you're going along. I'd never directed anything before, or I'd never written anything before, but I suppose it was a subject I knew quite a lot about. And so when it started, I had a little germ of an idea. I just wrote a short thing, I think it's about 5 or 6 minutes to begin with, and then I just kept thinking of more scenes you could have. And I did get quite ambitious. But it was just that everyone we asked was so accommodating in saying yes, absolutely, even down to obviously, I suppose ultimate Peter Jackson. When it came to directing, I almost forgot that we didn't have a director. The idea originally was I was going to make it with my own little home video camera, so the idea of a director just didn't come into it. It was just going to be me setting up the camera and literally running around the front with everybody else. And then when they gave me a camera crew, I actually got to the point, and it's absolutely true, when they said, okay, we're running, I said, okay, and I said, isn't someone meant to say action? I thought, oh no, that's me. So I suddenly almost found myself directing it by default, but I just found, it was just an extraordinary thing. I realised how many years of my life I have spent sitting in chairs, drinking cups of tea and eating sandwiches and waiting to be called to the set. I looked over at one point and there was Colin and Sylvester sitting there, sort of wrapped up in blankets, having a cup of tea. And I'm running around the set going, hey, let's do this shot here, let's do that shot there. What about this location? And it was like adrenaline flying all the time. Having said that, when I then went back to this filming, under normal circumstances, I was very happy to sit in my trailer and have a nice cup of coffee. But no, it was very, very exciting. Was that the question? What was the question?
The second question was, were you under the sheets?
Oh, definitely under the sheets. I don't know who says we're not. He's talking nonsense. You could see we're under the sheets. You see us go under the sheets, and there we are. How could you doubt it?
Thank you. So let's go back to Dominic. How did you get into Doctor Who music in the first place?
What doing it?
Well, take the question however you want to take it.
Well, I'll take it as doing it. I just took this route, which I've said before, I can't believe anyone actually would succeed with now, because I wrote a letter to John Nathan Turner, literally on a piece of paper, handwriting. I wrote a letter and said, Dear John, I could do the music to Doctor Who. Here's a cassette to prove it. And I sent a cassette in that I'd put together on my home recording system and a synthesizer. And he wrote back and said, oh, I really like that. Could you send me another tape? I'd like to hear what else you can do. So I sent him another tape. And then he called me in and said, okay, we'd like you to do it. But to this day, I still can't quite believe I got a job like that, because I don't think in a million years you could get work like that these days. But the competition, people doing that sort of thing, I think when I was doing it, people didn't have home studio setups really, so it wasn't really practical for people to produce TV music at home, and there weren't that many opportunities for electronic music on TV. Obviously, Doctor Who was a prime user of electronic music, so in that sense, I got lucky. But I just happened to do some recordings that John Nathan Turner really liked. Unfortunately, he offered me the job just before it got taken off the air. So it had a hiatus, 18 months, I think, is that right? So I didn't actually start working on it when I thought I was going to, so I came to it when Trial of a Time Lord started.
But you then proceeded to do various scores over the next 3 years. What would be your favourite one? Do you have a favourite score of the ones that you did?
Well, in many ways it would be Survival, because it's the last one I did, and so I felt I was improving as a composer. But I've got a particular fondness for the Happiness Patrol, because I liked the fact that music was so integral to the story, and the blues was a vital part of the music, and so we were able to combine electronics with blues, which is such a rare thing to be able to do, and it was a fantastic opportunity for me to muck around with things that I love doing. So in a sense, the Happiness Patrol.
Fantastic. Tim, any more questions?
Well, I've thought of one for Terry.
Okay.
This no. I'm never going to live that down there. Well, a few years back, I bought my own ring modulator, thinking, oh yes, I could do my own Dalek impressions for fun, and with the audio setup I had at the time, it was easier to do Davros impressions. And so the obvious question I have, seeing as I have a Davros voice expert right in front of me, is are there any tips you have at all in effectively doing an impression of your Davros voice?
You want me to do an impression of my Davros voice? Well, I mean, the thing about the Davros voice is it's informed by the mask. You had to move your mouth in a very exaggerated way in order to make any movement happen in the mask. Already you've got a rhythm of actually talking in a particular way, that kind of staccato delivery, and then you just basically bring the voice down in pitch, down a little further, bring a little psychosis in. That's where the trick is. When Davros starts to appear, the Doctor has to be exterminated. It's as simple as that.
Is don't do it yourself, employ charity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm very reasonable. I take Green Shield stamps.
Well, while we're on the subject of Davros, how did you get into that, and talk us through your three performances a little bit?
It was pure fluke, really. I mean, it was slated to be doing that story with Michael Wisher, but there was a strike, I think, or something like that, and everything was put back. Production was put back. The director then couldn't do it, so Matthew Robinson was brought in to direct it, and Michael Wisher had gone to Oz to do something else, a tour or something. And I just finished working with Matthew Robinson on a series down at TBS called Radio Phoenix, where I was playing this twit of a disc jockey, a sort of a smashy and nicey character. And he rang me up because he knew I could do all sorts of impressions and things like that. And he said, look, we're doing this thing. Do you know anything about the Daleks? And I said, well, yeah. I mean, I grew up, I was 16 when the first Doctor arrived, and so Troughton and Hartnell were my doctors. And he said, yeah, of course I do. He said, do you know anything about Davros? I said, no, because I stopped watching after them. And so he said, well, come down. He sat me down in front of Genesis and said, that's the character. Do you want to do that? Well, how many actors are going to say no? Because I was actually intrigued. I thought, well, actually, this is like doing a radio performance on telly, because so much of the character's got to come through the voice. And it was as simple as that. And then we basically got into studio. They recast my head, sat me in, covered me in alginate and plaster of Paris, and made a new mould and a new head. And we got into the first one, which was the one with Peter, with Resurrection. And I thought that was it. That would be quick 2 weeks and away. Great, thank you, lovely. But then they asked me back to do. Actually, Matthew asked me back to do Attack of the Cybermen, to be a real person for a change. When Colin took over, and I did that. And I thought it was great. And that's lovely working with people I'd worked with before. And but then they asked me to do Revelation. And that was a delight as well, because it also made me begin to move the character on from just being a ranting idiot, sort of intergalactic Hitler, into something with some element of trying to have some element of subtlety to it, anyway. And certainly in Revelation, when the Doctor discovers that he's feeding everyone their relatives' dead bodies, and he said, you didn't tell people you were feeding them their own relatives? He says, certainly not. That would have created what I believe is termed consumer resistance. So you get these sort of little black humour moments coming in, But I very nearly didn't do the last one, because I was actually working on a series with David Troughton up in Central called Tales of Sherwood Forest, which was nothing to do about Robin Hood. It was Pete Postlethwaite running a wine bar called the Sherwood Forest, and he wanted to turn it into Casablanca. So, we were in the middle of a 6-month run of filming, and they said, no, can't release him. So, but actually, JNT and Sarah got to their heads together, the two producers, and I was on basically lease lend to the BBC one morning, and Central in the afternoon, and I was only allowed 1 day in studio because we were filming. So I came in, literally did that one bit inside the Texas barbecue, and went away, shouting at Sylve on the other side of the studio. But great fun. Yeah, I never thought I was doing more than one, but I did. And then obviously when Big Finish started, they got in touch and said, would you like to do, or Gary said, would you like to do a Davros story without Daleks? And that was the first one I did with them, called Davros. Yeah, no, it's been, you know, again, like Peter, it's a job that keeps coming at you. You know, you ain't gonna lose it, I'm sure, you know, one way or the other. I think I've played him, what, 18 times now? With all the Big Finishes, and I did a stage production of it as well, some years ago for Children in Need for one night. Yeah.
Great. That's what I was saying. Tim?
Well, we get back to the subject of Davros and Big Finish. I greatly enjoyed the I Davros series of plays you did, all looking into the Davros backstory. I'm sure you must have greatly enjoyed doing those. Any thoughts you've got on those would be great.
Yeah, I Davros was, when Gary, he said I'm leaving Big Finish and I want to do this one as a final. I want to do a backstory of Davros called I Davros. Well, obviously it's I Claudius. And I said, yeah, it'd be great to actually explore that journey from, because we were basically showing Davros from a 15-year-old boy up to the creation of the very first Dalek, you know, and then it stopped. And the rest is, as I say, history. We started to look at it, and I was saying, well, you know, there's got to be a reason why this journey happens, why you got this Aryan youth who turns into this monster, and obviously along the way he gets crippled and deformed. And actually, my wife kicked the key of it because she is a counsellor and she works all sorts of people. She said, looking at Davros as a character in the stories I've seen and from what you're talking about here, she said, it strikes me that this is somebody who might be somewhere on the Asperger's spectrum of autism, because he's a savant, brilliant scientific mind, but he's got no social skills, can't interact with ordinary people. If he sees a problem, he goes for it and wipes everything out that stands in his path to get there. So, you know, his moral compass is just not there. He, you know...
I thought Davros had no social skills.
No, he has no social skills, not at all, no. I mean, I'm not saying now that people with Asperger's are going to end up as Davros. Please, I'll correct that straight away. But it had to get, there was a key there that the writers could begin to lock into and say, well, that opens one or two boxes for us that we can then explore. And so you saw this transition, and it was interesting because obviously we didn't have me playing the 15-year-old boy. We had one of the lads from one of the early episodes of the new series. But I was narrating it and then carried it on from the second one on when Davros was about 30 and right through to you know, completion. And it was good. It was sadly now I know far too much about Davros. You know, I've become the ultimate Davros nerd. You know, people can't ask me questions about Davros because I know them. You know, I mean the questions about that you had as Pat Troughton, Peter. You know, I can cover those. So that was it, really. But a great one to do. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, it really did lay one or two things in place. But whether they decide to pick those up, you know, in future episodes, should they bring Davros back to the new series, is another matter entirely.
Peter, your, well, as every era is reassessed every so often, new fans come to it. How do you think your era now stands in the pantheon of Doctor Who's?
I don't really think that's for me to say. I do think that the resurgence of Doctor Who, the return of Doctor Who, did a lot to make my Doctor seem less sort of out of place. I felt at the time, I felt myself at the time I was quite young to play the part. I'd been used to older Doctors. And now I look back, I don't seem out of place at all. In fact, it seems like I started a trend. But I'm very happy that they've gone back to an older Doctor, Peter Capaldi, because as I say, I'm biased, but that's what I grew up with, older Doctors. I don't know how it is in the pantheon of. Caves of Androzani has always been really high in terms of favourite stories. I think it was voted best story of all time by some people. I don't know who it was actually now, but that was very. I got a little award anyway. But yeah, I just think, you know, the great thing about Doctor Who is you're always your doctor. You know, it's not as if it's not really, I don't feel in competition. You know, only if there was another Doctor number 5 would I be in competition with them. But I'm very happy with the way it's worked out, and I'm very happy that, you know, I came back and did Time Crash, which was the kind of connection with the new series. And then, as you've already mentioned, the 5-ish Doctors last year with both Matt and David. Of course, I have a sort of sphere of influence over David. You can't really turn me down. It already gets leaned on quite heavily, which can be very useful. But yeah, no, I don't know. That's for others to say. But I feel personally now that I don't feel out of place at all.
I had a question there, but it's gone. Tim?
This is going to be about the 5-ish Doctors again, because I've been asked to ask you, is there any chance, as director, that you'll ever record a director's commentary for it?
Well, that's a good point, actually. Director's commentary I've not thought about. Maybe what we should do, I should get Colin, Sylvester and myself and whoever, David and Matt and Georgia and who else, just sit down and just have a chat with it, you know, go talk through it. That's not a bad idea. I'd not thought about that, I must admit. I met this morning, there's a very good article about the 5-ish Doctors in the Doctor Who magazine 50th anniversary special by Andrew Bixley, who's here today somewhere. Not here, is he? No. But I sort of gave him very detailed breakdown of how it came about, and he's written a brilliant article. But yeah, no, it might be fun to do that. Yeah, with Colin, Sylvester and myself. I might suggest that. Then we'll keep the copyright and flog it on iTunes. That seems to be the way to go. Let's flog it on iTunes, yes!
Fantastic. We've had 2 Bakers playing Doctor Who. We now have 2 Peters.
Yes.
And you've already intimated that you are a fan of the older Doctor. What do you think of his performance so far?
Oh, I thought he was great. I thought he was excellent. I'm looking forward to more of his Doctor. I thought he was very thoughtful. I talked to him, actually, I interviewed him for an American documentary that I was making, and he's very, very clever and astute about what he wanted to do with the Doctor, and I think he's doing just that. He wants to make him slightly darker, slightly less friendly, slightly less understanding of, you know, the way Doctor Who has been for a long time is he's in love with the human race, and I think Peter said to me, he's slightly less in love with them. he has great respect for them, but he doesn't keep understanding why he has to save them quite so diligently as his predecessors. I think it'll be very, very good, and I think it's very good for Clara, the character of Clara, you know, because I think it's a very different relationship than Jenna had with Matt, and I think that's good for the series and good for her. Shows gives her much more opportunity, I think.
Yeah, good stuff. Dominic, did you see the episode last week?
Yeah, I did.
What do you think of the new theme tune?
You think she might? I think I genuinely think I need to hear it a few more times to give you a proper judgment on it. In a way, it's nice to hear it returning to some electronic sounds in there. I think if I ever had the opportunity to do it again, I'd like to combine orchestral sounds with electronic sounds, because I think that's part of what made Doctor Who sound the way it sounded. But on the Peter Capaldi front, personally, I just think it's fantastic to have a Doctor that's older than me again.
Terry?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was really looking forward to Peter coming on. I mean, I've been a great admirer of his work for years, but and I knew he was going to be good. I mean, I was just looking forward to it immensely, you know. And well, as Colin said, it's nice to have a Doctor over the age of 12 again. He said that in great love, because he's great, you know, he does respect Matt and David as well. But yeah, no, it's great. You know, I love that scene with him and Brian Miller with the tram. It was just it made me very moved. You know, I just thought, oh God, that's good. And the final bit, you know, that explanation. Yeah, there is a bit of explanation when a Doctor regenerates, and there was a lot more explanation being needed. And I still feel, I mean, it'd be interesting to see tonight, but I still feel it's a bit like molten metal, which still hasn't quite settled. and he's been very clever at allowing things to come through and those will get in place, because he's a very intelligent man, and you know, I think we're in for a jolly good ride with him, you know, and I hope long may it last. Yeah.
I don't think I have any questions left.
Okay, I have another one. I think the thing that links all three of you, it's a slightly random panel, these podcast panels, but I think the thing that links all three of you currently on the stage is that you were all in Doctor Who in the JNT era. Maybe say a little bit about your experiences of the man.
Oh, I love John dearly. I thought he was the biggest and best promoter of the show that there has been. And that was really, I think, his forte. It's going to sound weird, I don't mean this in a bad way, because it was his show. I don't know if he was the biggest Doctor Who fan in the world, but he loved the programme he was producing, do you know? And I never fell out with him at all, but we did have sort of healthy discussions about where Doctor Who should be going. And I just felt all the time his eye was in the promotion of the show. He wanted to make the shows big, and we would get, you know, extraordinary press for it. I was slightly concerned one day when he said his ultimate aim was to produce the world's biggest soap opera. I wondered, was he trying to do that with Doctor Who? But perhaps not. But no, I loved him. I loved him dearly. He was great. I think he was good for the. He was good for the show. But as I say, what I love about the show now is it's you know, it's run by the people who grew up watching it during that era. It really is the lunatics running the asylum, and I think now the focus of the show is much more of the sort of the genre of the science fiction of love. And I don't know if John was really in that game, but he was devoted to the programme, no doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, my sort of biggest memory of John is the fact that, you know, as I was saying earlier, the fact that he gave me a job is that he was incredibly welcoming and sort of accepting of new talent. You know, he really encouraged people who I'd never done any professional TV work, and he was willing to take that sort of risk, which I think an awful lot of producers wouldn't do. And so I think it's to his credit that he employed a lot of people that had never done professional TV work before. You know, I'm sure not always successfully, but you know, the fact that he would take risks, you know, I think made him stand out. And yes, I didn't always agree with the things he wanted to do either, and I've talked about this before, but when he took me on to do incidental music before he asked me to rejig the theme tune. And when he called me in and said, would you ever go and do the theme tune as well? And he said, yeah, fine, absolutely brilliant. You know, panicked a bit, but then he sort of said, you know, I'd like you to make it a bit more jazzy. A bit more, maybe give it a bit of a disco feel, you know. So and I was thinking, oh God, that's absolutely the last thing I wanted to do. So, but again, to John's credit, he never really dug his heels in on that. You know, I said to him, I tried it and it didn't really work, and he was quite happy the way I did it. You know, so in fairness to him, he wasn't stubborn. You know, he was willing to listen to people, and as I say, willing to give people a chance, basically.
Great shirts. He just had great shirts. He was lovely. Yeah, John, bless him, he was very loyal to people, you know. I mean, there was no need, he didn't need to have brought me back to do, he could have used Mike Wisher, you know, he could have brought Mike Wisher back if he wanted to, but he was very loyal to people that worked with him, and, you know, I always got on really well with him. I didn't have any healthy discussions or arguments with him, but we got on really, really well, you know, and I was very sad when he went. It was a great shame, but yeah, a big guy, and yeah, as you say, he loved the show. Again, he was up there front and centre for the show, to push it out there and make it the best. And in some ways that might have been his downfall. He upset a lot of people in the, you know, the exuberance of his desire to put the show out there, that some of the more restrained areas of the BBC, I think, took exception eventually, which was a shame. But great man.
How are we doing for time, Siobhan? Okay, yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Tim. Thanks to all of our guests, to Terry, to Dominic, and to Peter. We've got another panel coming up shortly. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so this is the last of the podcast.